think you kind of send like some general questions.
Oh yeah. Yeah, before
Yeah,
you go live, yeah, we can do that.
yeah, no, those are all fine. I know you just put the thing of like who hasn't continues to inspires you. Maybe do you think that's something like more about like the college blockchain sort of angle or clubs or something could be more a bit more relevant. I was just thinking.
Yeah, we can do that. Let me uh hang on. Where's the questions? I thought I put in the calendar invite, apparently not. Okay, so all right, the 4 questions. How did you get started with Web3? Who has and continues to inspire you? And you're saying to change that one. Um,
Yeah, I think just like an angle that focuses more on like the college blockchain club side of things could be just a bit more relevant. Help like kind of segue the conversation there, I think.
yeah. Okay, so I guess maybe oh, geez. All right, how'd you get started with Web3? And um how about what have been some milestones that the club has achieved so far?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. All right. So how do the 4 questions look now?
Yeah, that all looks good to me.
All right, good stuff. In that case, okay, so Jay, go and post that YouTube video link into Discord and basically, yeah, just announce that that's Sunint's interview coming up. Or actually, no, I can just do it because we're not in a rush to start right away. Okay, just posted that. And then yes, and then you have the 4 questions in the chat. And all right. So like I was saying before, this one, rather than you starting with tech talk and then shorter interviews, you can go a little bit more in depth on your answers. So I guess Jay and Dean, go and watch. Yeah, go on YouTube, watch YouTube. If there's anything that we need to post back and forth from YouTube to Zoom or Zoom to YouTube, you do that. And then Christian, just keep an eye on Discord. And same thing, post things from Discord into the Zoom chat, and from the Zoom chat into Discord if necessary. And then when we're done, if there's any questions, we can do a Q&A real quick. So any questions, anyone?
No, sounds good.
Get to go in mind, and feel free to like ad hoc anything, questions, conversation. Like we can let it, you can let it flow.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess let's go and get started. Everyone, welcome to this interview for HackDW3C. We have today with us a founder. It's Sunint Bindra. He is the founder of Dartmouth Blockchain, and you can see his background is, well, it's a stunning view of the campus. So Sunint, go ahead and say hi so everyone can see that.
Yeah, thanks, Scotty. Hey everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Sunit. I'm currently a senior at Dartmouth studying computer science and economics. And I should say, especially I'm one of the co-founders, have a couple other people along with me, of Dartmouth Blockchain. We're pretty much the primary campus club for crypto, and do a lot of kind of things which we'll dive into. So yeah, happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here. Yeah, I think now before we jump into the interview part, one thing that a lot of us try to do when we're starting clubs on campus, we really want to say, here's a goal. What do we wish we had initially, and then try to create that. But also to say, how can we pave roads for others? And in this case, that's what he's been doing. But obviously, there was a point where he went from not having something to having it. So I guess before the club, Sunint, how did you get started with Web3?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I basically got started with it in high school. I guess just like some of the people around me were pretty into it, and that was definitely super helpful. I think most people get connected through a friend or a community member. So kind of started from there, and then gradually over time dipped into more like technical development. I do a lot of like, I'd say, like private consulting, if that makes sense. So for different companies, whether in technology or finance, helping them with their crypto, whether it's development, go to market strategy, sort of other things like that, really whatever they need. That's kind of more on the independent side. As you mentioned, Dartmouth blockchain is one of the things I've done. I've worked with a number of sort of crypto advocacy organizations. So help, as some of you might be familiar, Wyoming is kind of one of the more progressive crypto legislative states. They have their sort of blockchain and fintech for like emerging technologies committee, helped sort of, we spoke at there in sort of their sort of a state legislation and kind of helped get some things passed. So yeah, I'd say broadly I've been involved both in like the investing side. I worked in like venture capital and sort of investments myself in traditional finance, but also like in crypto. So through that, like on the technical development side and like policy are probably the major angles through which I'm actively involved.
All right, that's great. I do want to get a little clarification, not just for myself, but for everyone. I'm sure most people would be thinking, wait, do you really just say Wyoming? Because, one, smallest population in the state, two, it's Rocky Mountains. So we usually would imagine more people who are outdoorsy, ranchers, hunters. And I mean, I love going outside and camping and stuff all the time. But what would you say kind of turned Wyoming into that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess there's a lot you can really talk about, but I would really say I think it's just like an open-mindedness. I think there's a number of states, specifically in the US, that are, I would say, pretty progressive in terms of their crypto policy. And that comes from just having a forum where they can talk. And so I think that's pretty important. I think the Wyoming legislature, specifically having created this like blockchain and sort of emerging technologies committee, I think it's called like the Blockchain Financial Technology and like Digital Innovation Committee or something along those lines. So it's clear that they like take a focus on that. And I think that's pretty important. Beyond that, I think it's the angle, right? So the primitives, whether it's from identity, cybersecurity, even just like economic benefits and taxation, like are different for different stakeholders and particularly governments and state governments in general. So at that regard, I think I would say cybersecurity and identity were things of particular focus for Wyoming, as well as like the ability to use like what I would say is, I guess, like use these like technologies towards their benefit. For other states, I've seen it for different reasons. I think some are very like tax focused and revenue focused, like the business and, trying to be the sort of next Silicon Valley and kind of bring that business there. But I think the other part of it is like Wyoming is a pretty like business progressive state too, to my understanding. I think outside of just like crypto, they're trying to create this sort of system where they can sort of impact what they call like digital assets. And so I think it's interesting to use this terminology of digital assets, not crypto, because I think they're being a bit more like forward thinking and a bit more broad in their scope. So perhaps that's kind of answers to clarify your question.
All right. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where anyone who looks at Congress, for example, they would see Representative Patrick McHenry seems to be, pretty bullish about crypto and all that digital assets, and he's from North Carolina. But then you see he represents a district that includes Charlotte, where there's a lot of major banking companies, and then Representative French Hill from my home state of Arkansas. Arkansas is known to be very, very conservative, but he's actually been a very strong proponent of digital stuff. In fact, he chaired a committee that actually tried to increase the number of hackathons across the U.S. for high school students. So I think it's one of those things. Yeah, usually some states look a certain way, but like what you're saying, depending on their views on business, it actually can lead them to be very pro tech in ways that those of us who are in the tech world might not. We might be very surprised to see. But yeah, thank you for sharing that and clearing that up. I think
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just a kind of quick point maybe to add on
Yeah.
there. I like to point out that the way I got involved this is not specifically through crypto as well, which I think is important to note. To the point of like why Wyoming, I think the main sort of piece of legislation they had at the time was the WRDA, or the Wyoming Registered Digital Asset. So that's kind of reform they had in mind. And some of you may be familiar with like SSL or TLS. Basically, if you're not, if you wonder why like every URL is HTTP and some of them HTTPS, that extra S allows for TLS, or an added layer of encryption for things like e-commerce and your Amazon orders and things like that. So I got involved with one of the researchers sort of co-authored the paper and helped to create what TLS is today essentially. And he was sort of the one speaking on behalf of this Wyoming Registered Digital Asset. So what I like to point out, there's a lot of different angles of emerging technologies, both in crypto and outside, that can sort of expose you to these types of areas.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess that it sounds like that's kind of how you transition from there's no Dartmouth blockchain to, you know what, I'm going to create that club. Is that how it happened?
I mean, not specifically. I think there's just like a couple of, I think there's just a cohort of students at school who had this interest, but wanted to sort of formalize it. The club is kind of born of that. Basically kind of diving into like the Dartmouth blockchain. I'd say it's really this sort of like ecosystem for, individuals who are pretty talented and pretty committed in blockchain to sort of build our competency, but also connect with other students interested in that. Basically, we publish a lot of research papers, build technical projects, and recently those become more sort of like funded or grant-given startups, host campus events, and attend crypto conferences, whether it's like hackathons. We were at NFT NYC last year, ETH Denver pretty recently, Decentral Miami. So just things like that. We try to hit the board wherever we can and run the gauntlet up.
Nice, nice. And now that you found the club, co-founded the club, you've been operating this for some time. What are some milestones that you've achieved that as a whole club?
For sure. I mean, I would say that so we run on like quarters here, or terms as we like to call it at Dartmouth, and semesters. I would say each quarter has been definitely a milestone in itself. I would say the like sort of major impacts are like having those successful projects. And I think what we sort of pride ourselves on is our thesis of like each project, or like, sort of protocol we work with, or any work we do, should not just kind of like stick within the club or exist on some sort of like Medium article that no one really reads, right? The idea is very to be like high impact driven, and that all our sort of work and our project should go in and reach and interact with like a real organization or crypto VC or whatever have you. So pretty much almost like all, if not all, of our projects have directly impacted either a protocol. Usually a protocol like funds us, or we're actively talking to someone. We've been talking to like the CEO of Scale, for example, did a project with them, sort of benchmarking. We've created Antheus, which is a sort of DeFi analytics platform that's funded by like Aave, Euler, and a couple of others, like several other protocols. So that's like one of the projects that's been really successful. We have a podcast we launched too, which you should go check it out. Pine Pod at Spotify. We've had like the head of strategy and business dev at Solana, former CMO of Gitcoin, heads of crypto VCs and things like that. We even got to speak to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who her and Loomis, who's actually going to Consensus, if I remember that correctly. And so they've been on some like crypto legislation as well. So I think what's our sort of like, I guess, golden, like, sort of secret sauce, or sort of like where we struck gold, is being able to like create high impact things that extend into the ecosystem. And that's kind of what our focus was to begin with. So that's where I'd say we found the most success. And those are the kind of milestones we look to achieve continuously.
That's great. Before we move on, can you go and post the link to the your podcast into the Zoom chat, and then Dean and Christian, y'all can post that to the Discord for everyone, and Jay, if you can post that to the YouTube chat for everyone. Want to make sure plug this a little bit, get you a couple more viewers, or I guess not viewers exactly, listeners.
For sure. Yeah. And I threw our Twitter on there as well, that VoxTrain. We kind of do a lot of Twitter spaces and things like that. So sort of along those lines, we've done Twitter spaces with Near. We did, I mentioned Solana already, Binance. We did a campus event in Twitter spaces with them. I think that's like my sort of, I guess, hypothesis, and what I've come to found is that like the best way to really get your like impact out there and to get your message out there is to work with all these organizations and protocols that have a reach, but also a pretty active, like dedicated base of developers or users or whatever have you. These are the people who are going to be most impacted and perhaps take your advice to heart, and some vice versa. You can also learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the interesting things a lot of people didn't expect is when Twitter Spaces came out. At the time, it was a bit of Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, and they both went, pretty quickly. Both went big, and I don't think anyone expected Twitter Spaces to be the kind of the one for crypto, because I remember at the time, Clubhouse was kind of the one where a lot of people gravitated at first. But that's how things are. They ebb and flow, and so yeah, everyone, we encourage you, check out the links. Definitely go visit the podcast, and also twitter.com/voxchain. So so all the stuff you talked about, what are some of your longest term goals in Web3? Maybe for the club, maybe for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'd say it's definitely a bit of a tough question, right? I'm still pretty young. So, ideally, I don't know exactly where I want to end up. And hopefully that's kind of the fun of the game. But broadly, what I would say, like thematically, my sort of aim is to take kind of like innovative ideas or primitives and sort of translate these to impacting different like frameworks, whether it's technology or more global policy, whatever have you. And really, the way I've kind of been thinking about that structurally in my mind is to take these sort of like macro pattern recognition skills to help like assess and quantify the sort of impact and like interaction of different world systems on one another. So that's like a bit abstract, but that's broadly kind of what my thematic goal is, and I would say how I think through things. What that looks like specifically, I would say definitely still, growing Dartmouth blockchain is very important, and I think a super impactful way. But I would say it's kind of how I've gone about that, and how people on the club as well have gone about that. Like I said, we do a lot of projects with protocols, and that's obviously super helpful. But I think beyond that, we've kind of shifted to more like an incubator style model now recently. I think that's been like extremely successful. And so we'll see what comes out of that, but definitely exciting stuff on the roadmap for sure. Professionally, entering, TradFi crypto as well, and kind of shifting towards that long term. We'll kind of see where exactly things end up. Definitely a hard question to answer nonetheless, but I'm excited for the road that lies ahead. And I would say that like oftentimes, having fluidity of goals is kind of important for me as well. Recognizing that you don't know what you don't know at times, and being able to sort of pick up with that and roll with the punches is pretty important. So I'd say for right now, I'm in a pretty impressionable phase, and we'll kind of see where things go from here.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Coming out of college, I definitely felt like there's a ton of stuff I don't know. How am I gonna go figure it out? Guess I'll just go make mistakes. So, just kind of figured it out over time. But yeah, definitely, like you said, it's just one step at a time. Which I keep saying one step at a time. Did this in an earlier talk because that actually, I'm not trying to make a pun, but that literally, for the next question, how would you like to impact those following your footsteps?
Yeah. So basically, I'd say there's like a couple of things there, right? I think firstly, it's recognizing that like, I think what's exciting about crypto is that the barrier to entry is getting like increasingly younger, both from like age, you see people who are like more younger, and like at this point, the younger you are, the better you are at coding and things like that, which is exciting. But barrier to entry, whether it's from like a policy lens, from starting your own protocol or your own utility or whatever have you. And so I think like I don't think I necessarily have an impact to say there's people following my footsteps by any means. But I think just getting to that point, it's the journey that matters, right? I'd say like what excites me and excites us at the club about going to conferences like ETH Denver, like NFT NYC, Decentral Miami, and others, is that it kind of helps to bring things back into perspective. There's a lot of, what it really shows us is a lot of like intelligent, mostly younger people in crypto who are excited, and kind of pushing forward, whether it's through, coding and programming, whether it's through just their investing, or just policy or any other lens, design and things that have you. So I think just like being able to follow your own path. And what's exciting here is that like, I think there's a lot of like unexplored territory. You're never going to be, the next Vitalik or Balaji or whatever have you, right? You should be the next you. And so that's kind of like the way I like to think of it, is like figure out like what actually is exciting for you, and what's something that inspires you and pushes you to, make impactful real work. And then I think the rest you'll kind of figure out from there. But, I think for me, I'm definitely oftentimes inspired by a lot of other people in the space. And that's really motivating. So I'm excited by the work that other people do. And even for their college blockchain clubs, we had other college blockchain clubs help us when we were starting out too. And that was super impactful for us. We probably wouldn't be here today without their support. Even if for the other events we go to, we always connect with other clubs along the way. And so I think kind of being in this shared journey is pretty exciting. and definitely some way that you're able to sort of exponentially grow your impact and your reach, as well as just, the fun you have along the way, which is obviously important as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one big thing is when you're talking about, you got to be yourself. Do you have any advice for people who are in the phase of trying to figure themselves out? Because you said you're in an impressionable phase. I'm sure a lot of us, maybe we kind of go in and out that phase. What would you say to someone who's in that phase?
Yeah. Like I said, like I'm still a student, so I don't think I'm really like have like I can talk from like a retrospective, sort of view on this. But what I can say is something that I realized, or I'm actively realizing, is this idea that like you're never going to be ready, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take the jump, right? So like jump at opportunities and kind of dive deep. Even when he reached out for me to speak, I was like, okay, this seems like something interesting. And even when I was doing, for example, like Twitter Spaces with like Binance or Near or other have you, I'm like, damn, this is like, these are Twitters with like 1 million people or however many followers they have and things like that. And so it's like, am I really qualified to do this? And there's a healthy dose of like risk aversion you should have. But I think beyond that, you should also really try to dive into opportunities. And that's what's exciting for me and exciting about the space. Like I said, barrier to entry is low, but also barrier to like, I think excellence is very achievable, very open. I think there's definitely a bit more of like a meritocracy, and figure out like the ways you're able to like demonstrate your value proposition. Some people, for example, on Twitter, are very research driven, for example, and they actually put out like good research. And that's when someone like a Paradigm will notice them and then like pick them up to join their VC, right? Just because like the research they put out. Some people are very like programming driven. So I'd say be open-minded, try different things, whatever your skill set is, and jump at opportunities when they arise. I think that's the exciting about the space is that like everyone's, always like a Telegram message or Discord message or Twitter, Twitter DM away. And so it's pretty easy to get connected to some pretty like impactful people in the space. And I think it can do a lot for you. And as well as like also makes things a lot more like achievable in that way as well.
All right. Thanks a lot. I guess to close out, do you have any, I guess, whether it's advice that you've given someone and you realize, wait, that's really good, or someone who gave you advice or advice someone else gave you that, it just kind of hit you a certain way? Is there anything you'd like to leave everyone?
Yeah, I don't think I'm in much of a position to give other people advice. I would say just trying to listen to other people is probably my advice. What helps me is like learning from everybody else. I try to be pretty open-minded and dive headfirst in a conversation, if that makes sense. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that goes a long way. And don't sell yourself short either. Like recognize what you're good at and try to, help that kickstart things. And yeah, I don't know, last thing, I don't know, check out our club website. We're happy to work with anyone. Shoot us a Telegram message or Discord message or anything. If you're at one of these events, we're definitely happy to meet up as well. And yeah, especially with other college blockchain clubs, I think that's super exciting. I know a lot of you listening kind of might be in your blockchain clubs or in school or recently out of school, that kind of thing. And so I think that's a cohort that we're all often most excited to work with and have a lot of fun with as well. So definitely reach out if you're interested. And yeah, I mean, best of luck with the whole conference and hackathon perspective as well.
All right. Thanks for that, Sunint. Excited to have everyone from Dartmouth join us. Obviously, everyone from other schools as well. But yeah, thank you for your time on this Friday night. Thanks for imparting so much wisdom on us. I would say probably the biggest thing, everyone, definitely go check out Sunint's spot, or I guess Sunint in the club. There's Spotify link we put into the YouTube chat, also the Twitter link. And then anyone who wants to follow up with questions, Sunint will, you already have his LinkedIn on that schedule, but we'll also put it in the video description below. And we'll include the links as well. And then feel free to follow their club, hit them up. Maybe there's some interview you want to listen to, just hop on and listen in. So yeah, anyone who has any questions, feel free to post them on Discord. And
there's one more question from the YouTube chat.
Oh, Sean Rowe, the half Chinese, half Korean cyborg asks, how cold does New Hampshire get?
That's a good question. I think right now, what are we doing? So I think of in Celsius. I actually spent a couple of years up in Canada, so I think of in Celsius, which might be my dirty little secret. I'd say it gets about -10, -20 sometimes Celsius in the cold days. Right now we're doing pretty good. It's proper spring term right now, so we're enjoying the weather.
I know Celsius as well, and anything below 10 terrifies me. For people who know Fahrenheit, 10 Celsius is 50 Fahrenheit. In my defense, I grew up in scorching hot states. So, when you're mowing lawns in 115, 120-degree weather, and then you give me 50 degrees. So basically, I'm going from essentially 48, 49, 50 Celsius to 10 Celsius. It sounds a little terrifying to me. So, yeah, Sean, hopefully the temperature isn't too bad for cyborgs like you. We appreciate the questions. You've been watching us. Hopefully, we're not trying to leave you in the cold this time. But we do need to wrap up and let Sunint get to his Friday night. So any other questions, please feel free to post it in Discord. And Sunint, thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you around, and definitely try to collaborate some more in the future.
Yep, likewise. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate the time.